DeMeco Ryans' wide 9 defense and why it is a violent and bloody affair and that it inflicts harm and danger onto other NFL teams, specifically offenses, a lot of tight ends. Tyler Higbee takes a beating in this one. I'm Seth Payne. I played in the NFL for 10 years. The first 5 years of the Texans' existence, I was there, sometimes haphazardly because of injuries. Today, I want to talk about DeMeco Ryans' wide 9 defense. And he said something at the Texans town hall the other day, which is kind of like a Texans pep rally, that got a lot of people going. But I want to explain that what he said was more than just lip service. This is reality, because there's an astounding statistic that backs up what DeMeco talks about here.
So how I view football and how I see it is it's a team that plays fast and a team that is the most physical team on Sundays. All right, when you line up across from us, that next week you should be hurting a little bit, all right? Because we want to play a physical brand of football. We want to play fast, attacking, and we want to get after people.
We want to get after people. That's all, that's all what everybody says all the time when they're talking about defense. And every new coach says, hey, we're going to be an attacking defense. We're not going to sit around and just take blows and absorb contact. No, this is the astounding statistic. When teams played the 49ers last year, DeMeco was the defensive coordinator. When teams played the 49ers and they had a game the immediate week afterwards, they were 0-15. 0-15 the week after playing the 49ers. And you could watch 49ers games and say, wow, these guys are a physically bruising bunch, both on defense and offense. And this wasn't just a matter of the 49ers having a weak schedule or something. Those teams were 3-11-1 versus, I had to do the math in my head for a second, 3-11-1 versus the spread the next week when they played. So whether it was a good team or a bad team, they tended to fare very poorly according to expectations that next week. And I choose to think that it was because they beat the snot out of them. So those teams, they did feel that pain. They did feel that punishment. How did they do that? And here, let me add this just real quick. That was with the Raiders' loss to Kansas City. The season concluded with opponents of the 49ers being 0-15 the week after playing San Francisco. The Chiefs were the one team that had a bye week after playing San Francisco. So they ended up, they won the 2 weeks after. But doesn't count. And then if you want to add the Eagles to that too, the Eagles played in the postseason and then lost 2 weeks later to the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously. So this is where we get to talking about the Ultraviolence. This scene from A Clockwork Orange, which is all about the Ultraviolence. But you might be wondering, hey, when do we have to wait to find out about this Ultraviolence? Do we have to wait until September when the real football starts? No. This was August 22nd, the preseason versus the Green Bay Packers, when the Green Bay Packers found out that DeMeco Ryans' defense does not mess around with fake football in August. Watch Hufanga come up and get flagged for an illegal hit in what was A, a completely illegal hit, even if it was a defenseless receiver or something, but B, this was a running back who very well could have defended himself, but just wasn't ready for the onslaught that was the 49ers. This is where I get really excited, because one thing that DeMeco has talked about has been, A, that he doesn't have to talk a lot about what their expectations are for physical defense, that they just get the right kind of guys, and B, it's just that, in finding the right kind of guys. And I think a lot of that you saw in the draft this year, but also the kinds of guys that Nick took last year. A guy like Jalen Petrie, he's a DeMeco Ryans type of guy. As far as DeMeco and where he starts with a defensive philosophy of obviously stopping the run, but it's more than a cliche. This is DeMeco talking about his philosophy in stopping the run.
My philosophy on stopping the run is you have to do everything possible to stop the run. All right, that's the first thing first. That's the goal for our defense, is make teams one-dimensional, make them have to drop back and pass the ball. Then can we go and disrupt the quarterback with enough pressure up front from our front four guys?
I feel bad doing this to you, but I have to remind you of what the Texans' run defense was like last year. This was the Texans versus Tennessee in Houston. They allowed over 300 yards rushing. And I know you're going to say, well, Derrick Henry. Yeah, a lot of Derrick Henry's hyperinflated stats have come over the past 3 seasons against the Texans specifically. But we're going to be talking today about how the defensive ends, the interior defensive line, and the linebackers have to play. This is a smorgasbord of disgusting run stopping right there. This right here, I want you to watch the linebackers, because this is something that can't happen and shouldn't happen in DeMeco's defense. But watch the linebackers over pursue and then just completely open up a running lane there. And then even the Texans offensive linemen get in on the mix here. They couldn't stop the run for crap either, getting abused. Okay, now this was a non-Derrick Henry run, but if you just think about fundamental football, let's constrict the holes as opposed to, say, maybe having a hole that extends from inside the hash mark out to the actual numeral 4 right there. When you've got defensive linemen caved inside, linebackers not replacing. Christian Harris right here does a really good job of getting downfield. I don't want to pick on Christian Harris, but I'm going to point one thing out from this play with Christian Harris. 2 things, really. One, he had missed all of training camp, and he had some sloppiness in this game. Second game he ever played in the NFL after missing all of training camp and a lot of the first part of the season. But you do see him hustling downfield. Christian Harris, you're going to see some Fred Warner later on, and I want to watch like how Fred Warner compares to Christian Harris in his second game ever, where Harris is doing all right here, but just he's a beat late and a step slow, and he ends up being just off target and stopping Derrick Henry. And you saw a lot of that last year from a lot of guys. This is how I envision the 2023 Texans defense when they talk to the 2022 defense.
What the hell you think you're doing with that little shit? Stop it! Stop it! Don't shoot that little motherfucker no more!
Look, Lovie Smith's defense in a lot of ways reminded me of the guy with a little gun on Harlem Nights, because they would talk about inflicting damage and harm and creating turnovers, and yet at the end of the day, especially when it came to stopping the run, they were completely ineffective. Tommy guns were ineffective in that scene too, but still, you know what I'm getting at. This is the thing about the Texans, the DeMeco Ryans defense. Wide 9. You're going to hear this a lot, and it's kind of it's overly simplified to call it a wide 9 defense. The wide 9 is a position that a defensive end plays, and when we use it in this context, all it means is you're going to see defensive ends lined up outside the tight end, and usually even a little bit wider than where this guy is right now. But you see at the bottom of the screen, that defensive end is also lined up out wide. And what that does is it forces runs to the inside. And on this play right here, he's got a tighter alignment than even normal. But you can see he's cocked in. He's going to force against this pathetic blocking tight end. Tyler Higbee, fine enough as a human being and as a player, but as a blocker, he should be no match for a guy like Will Anderson. Those guys should get eaten up by defensive ends. So you stick them out there and you have them force all the runs to the inside. That puts a lot of pressure on the linebackers. It puts a lot of pressure on the interior defensive line, but it also allows those linebackers that we talked about, how sometimes they fast flow too fast. Then it allows them to play downhill. As long as they recognize run, forget about your pass responsibilities and get downhill. And what you see is, we're talking about inflicting harm and damage. Tyler Higbee gets rolled up over the pile by the defensive end on this play and gets injured. See right there, slammed to the turf. This is one of several times that Tyler Higbee over the past several years leaves the field like this. I would never celebrate nor encourage injury, yet when your team does a good job and hits people hard and drives them over piles, I have to acknowledge that it was a physical job, well done. And they did that repeatedly to Tyler Higbee. The guy that everybody talks about, of course, is Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa to the left of your screen. Now, that's more of a true wide 9 alignment on a tight end. And you see, and they're nickel here. Don't worry about nickel and base. I just want to get the defensive end alignment so you can see some of the basics of this. The other defensive end cocked out wide too. So clearly and obviously, Any run is going to get funneled to the inside as long as these guys are doing their job. He's going to eat that guy up, force the ball back inside. Then everybody eats, including Nick Bosa, who makes the play. Now, it's not like that's all they're ever going to do. They're going to slant inside. They're going to line up inside at times. But the basic thing that they want to be really good at is these opportunities where they can have guys outside and force everything inside. And then the offense is going to have to make adjustments off of this. So, like when Nick Bosa here, you're going to see him slant inside. But watch the left offensive tackle who's thinking wide nine. I got to get out and jump all the way out to that guy and seal him off. He's going to overcommit a little bit. And if you can imagine Will Anderson doing this from a 3-point stance, Will Anderson taking a huge step like that, getting underneath that offensive tackle. And even now, the offensive tackle should really be able to wheel on him easily and wash him out. But because Bosa gets such a nice big initial stride there, he comes redirects, gets back upfield, and makes a tackle himself. This is the kind of stuff that they're hoping to get out of Will Anderson. Is it fair to compare him to Nick Bosa, defensive MVP? Yeah. Well, that's the kind of expectations we're going to have. I'm cool with that. So this is Will Anderson in college. And I just want to show you some of the difference of Will Anderson, and how he aligned. And he'll align in some of these alignments in the NFL too. It's just that this is what he was doing this a lot more commonly, and was still very, very productive. But here he is in a 3-point stance in a classic 7 technique, 6-eye, whatever you call it with your particular defense. But inside the tight end, you're going to see a whole different scenario here. You're using one of your best players, clogs things up. It's not his responsibility in this scheme to keep everything on the inside, and the play bounces outside. They do a good job of it. They've got, plenty of good linebackers. But that play likely would hopefully look different, and it would get nipped in the bud right there in the inside in this Texans defense. Here, I wanted to show this because this, especially when you think about Will Anderson, who is super, super productive in college, and yet had plays like this where he's in a 2-point stance, he's aligned head up on a flexed tight end, and he's going to be in a read and react mode. That means you can see where his stance is kind of square there. He's not going to try to fire off the ball. He's just going to read and react. He's going to see where this tight end is going, jam him if he's going out on a route, or maybe have him in coverage, or go with him versus the run. So he mirror steps. And after that, after he makes contact with a tight end, reads that it's pass, then he becomes a pass rusher, gets rid of that, has to get rid of that offensive or that tight end to face another tight end or H-back or whatever it might be. Ball comes out. It's still a good play, but you can see how much less aggressive it is than if you were to be cocked out wide in a wide 9. That's a whole lot of shuffling around before he gets a chance to get into his pass rush. That's the run mostly I wanted to cover as far as Nick Bosa, and how, first and foremost, you got to stop the run. There are some weaknesses if a guy is only looking at it as, hey, I'm cocked out wide, I'm going to get the quarterback every time. If he starts abandoning his run responsibilities, it can get super ugly, like really, really bad if you have a guy like that. That's why Nick Bosa is really good, and we'll show an example of how he's cognizant of his run responsibilities in here. But as a pass rusher, when you line up wide like that, you get a lot of one-on-ones, and you've got a more direct line to the quarterback, and you get a real head of steam going before you make contact. So this kid's ends up getting his feet crossed up. That's bad right there. As he's trying to sprint out to Bosa, basically. It looks more like a defensive back than anything else. Bosa uses his momentum against him, comes up underneath, gets him pretty easily. I just wanted to show this. This is Will Anderson doing very much the same thing. Will Anderson's good at getting guys going upfield and then coming back underneath, getting the sack. That's going to be something that Will Anderson hopefully can take advantage of more. Here, Nick Bosa is a wide 9. Now, remember, if you're overly aggressive in this and all you're thinking is get into the backfield, get to the quarterback, there are times where you can get caved down on by a guy like, Odell Beckham Jr. there, number 3. This is where the Rams try to get cute, but the trouble with cute is that sometimes it's hard to execute when you're being too cute. And you think like, oh yeah, we'll crash down on Nick Bosa with Odell Beckham Jr. That should work out smashingly. Yeah. So Bosa understands what's going on there, saw that he was getting cracked on, but also knew what his threats were. and he stayed cognizant of it. Will Anderson has done a lot of stuff like that. Here's Nick Bosa at the top of your screen. Wide alignment, allows him to get the speed rush going. Will Anderson now, I just wanted to show a few clips of him in a 3-point stance. Just watch how quickly he gets rid of these guys with his hands. I mean, this is really good stuff. Down at the bottom of your screen, he rushes, slants to the inside. A little too much of a shimmy there, but then he wipes, uses his hands really well. Like, ideally in this year's defense, he'd have even more of a head of steam going before he tried to stutter step like that. He does a really good job when working out of his stance, but when it comes to being conscious of exactly what you're supposed to be doing, he's at the top of your screen here as a defensive lineman. Instead of just rocking into the backfield here, he wrong arms it. It's the right thing to do. It's the selfless thing to do. He's supposed to bounce that play back outside. He just happens to actually wrong arm it and make the play, which is the most highly sought after thing you can do as a defensive lineman. October 1st, 2021. This is on a 49ers blog. The headline after a bad loss versus the Green Bay Packers was that the 49ers must abandon the wide 9 defensive alignment now. They would go on to be a top 5 defense the rest of the year. And then the next year as well, in 2022, the top defense in a lot of respects, certainly a top 3 in almost every category. The weaknesses that there are in the wide 9 defense. One of them is the linebackers have to really have a good feel for recognizing run versus pass, because as they have that extra responsibility, as all these runs are going to get it funneled to the inside, they might have pass coverage responsibilities like in cover 3 where they got to get out to the flats. And it puts them kind of in a bind where it's really hard for those guys to get out there. And we're going to see Tyler Higbee, our friend, take advantage of this and yet also get screwed over for it, because there is something that DeMeco Ryans calls the kill zone, and it's that area of the defense that sometimes this defense will almost invite the throw to be made, and that's when it's on the linebackers and the safeties to really just come up and not literally, but as close to literally as possible, kill people. And that's just football, my friends. So what you hope you have are really good safeties and really good linebackers. I want you to look up here. This is a play that, ends up being a good completion, but it shows both some of what you want in the defense and like other things that you have to accommodate for. But watch Hufanga, the safety. He's the guy, remember, that knocked out that running back in a preseason game. Hufanga, the safety up there, the play clock down at your right, you can see it's down to 3 seconds. Hufanga doesn't look like he's blitzing. Looks like he's blitzing. 1 second, the snap's about to come. I'll credit Matt Stafford for making a good play on here. But disguise is very, very important. If the quarterback's going to feel like he has some easy pickings over the middle, you want him to be sure that he doesn't always feel super comfortable in what his pre-snap read is. But you can see there, they're going to throw a screen to Tyler Higbee, because in this instance, you did have Nick Bosa, coming hell-bent for leather, 2nd and 6. Probably could have felt that was screen. And the defensive lineman in general could have done a better job of recognizing that was screen. But you've got that area out in the flat. And guys, it's hard for guys to get out there in time when they're worried about their run responsibilities. But this is where you have to look at Jimmy Ward, number 1, just above my head right there. Jimmy Ward, now a current Houston Texan, entering the kill zone, whereas Tyler Higbee comes to make a first down. He gets injured and ends up leaving the game. He would return in this game, but this is a common theme we see with guys that they gotta pay for their production, and this is the kind of thing. Let me minimize myself. This is the kind of thing that hopefully we'll see a lot of this year. It's a low, but not so low that it's dirty, and yet another scene of poor Tyler Higbee. So Fred Warner. Now this is why I showed Christian Harris earlier. Christian Harris needs to be like Fred Warner, which is easy to say, harder to do. But if you're going to have defenses that have weaknesses in terms of quarterback, linebackers getting out to the flats, or if a defensive end does screw up his responsibilities and you need a linebacker to make up for it, Fred Warner, they're getting out to the flats versus a running back, saving a touchdown. Fred Warner here. Again, run wasn't contained. There was a hold there, but he made it to the sideline anyway. This play was just phenomenal because if you compare this play perhaps versus the Eagles, I believe, to the one we showed earlier versus Christian Harris, where Fred Warner is recognizing and taking the fight to the offensive lineman before the offensive lineman has a chance to get a good angle on him. He's just money with this. And he was not a real high draft pick or anything. Fred Warner, sideline to sideline down there. Christian Harris definitely has that ability. Here we've got zone run. Doesn't get turned back in like you'd like on this because the defensive linemen get caught up in a game. So when you're in a defense that's predicated on turning all the zone runs back to the inside, you're not going to be 100% successful at it. So you need guys like him right there making that play. The other thing about Fred Warner, man, this is where Fred Warner, who's coached by DeMeco Ryans as a rookie, like all of his tackles, you're going to watch in the open field. Sometimes people make too much of a mystery of open field tackling, and they make it more about athleticism or reading than it needs to be, when really it's about knowing where your help is, what your leverage is, and then forcing the guy into a position to make the tackle easier. So you see Fred Warner, he settles in and just kind of got just far enough to create the cutback and then wait for the cutback. Like, he's just really good at that's not the best example there. Oh, and then one last shot. This has always bothered me. I don't know if it's bothered you guys. Matt Stafford and his, like, what is that thing that he does? Look at him. It's like when these people, if you're somewhere where you're in a group fitness class and you're supposed to be doing lunges and the jackass who's winning it or doing the heaviest weight is like doing half lunges like that. It's a big problem for the Rams. But I feel reasonably good about if you're covering up these weaknesses from a wide nine. So vulnerability to inside runs. This is where Toa and any of these other guys, Denzel Perryman, I'm going to play his press conference. Probably won't get to it until tomorrow. But Denzel Perryman, they brought in to compete. But you've got Toa, who was drafted in the fifth round, right? Toa, you've got Christian Harris. You've got all these guys that hopefully make a difference. You re-sign Malik Collins. I think the safeties in general, Jimmy Ward especially, like Jimmy Ward should be paying dividends in a lot of ways, both in the passing game and the run game, and just with tutelage of Petrie. But Sheldon Rankins, Malik Collins, like all that hopefully should be better than it was last year. You want to be able to penetrate, but give a damn about stopping the run. As far as some of the weaknesses on screen plays and quick throws, A, you need linebackers who can get out there. B, safeties who are smart enough to diagnose. And C, you need defensive linemen who are also smart enough to diagnose. There was one play of Bosa that I ended up cutting out accidentally, where Bosa recognizes that it's going to be that tight end screen. I think it was later in that same game, and actually just does a nice little surreptitious hold of Tyler Higbee and screws up the timing. So conscientious, smart guys, hopefully like Will Anderson and the rest of them will be good at that. Susceptibility to mobile quarterbacks. This is something to think about because your defensive ends are out wide. There are just bigger gaps by which quarterbacks can find running lanes. And obviously in the modern NFL, this is a bit of concern. The 49ers last year had losses and struggled most versus mobile quarterbacks. And if you think about even, I hate to use the NFC Championship game as a complete example because obviously the defense was hung out to dry by not having a healthy quarterback on their team. But I think you saw some of the juice of Nick Bosa certainly being taken out of him. He was injured too. But the defensive line in general, when they had to worry about a quarterback who's involved in the run game, and when they have bigger gaps and more real estate to defend, that can be an issue. So certainly not insurmountable, but something they're going to have to obviously pay attention to. Hey, you made it all the way to the end of what was probably a pretty long video because I tend to go long. Really appreciate you hanging out with me. And I would love if you would like and subscribe. I do a whole lot of NFL content, whole lot of Houston content. I played 10 years in the NFL. Now I do a sports radio show in Houston. I just started doing YouTube a few months ago, and I'm absolutely loving it. So thank you for the support.